Good Saturday morning. It's nice to have you with us on the Week in Review. Verdict with Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson with you. And here are some of the stories that you may have missed that we talked about this week. First up, El-Sayed trying to tone down the rhetoric of his past to make you feel like he's not a radical. Well, how radical is he? Just take a look at his sister in her own words, and you'll understand exactly where they're all coming from. Up next, the Democrats Socialists of America, they put out their platform agenda, and it's radical. Well, now the Democratic Party has put out some of their new mandates, and it includes abolishing ICE. Are they competing for who's more extreme? We explain that as well. And finally, a new national security concern that involves Hasan Piker and his brother. So what has he said to put him on a concern list? We have that for you as well. It's the Week in Review, and it starts right now.
Democrats are used to the media just being their cheerleaders and press agents, and so any criticism they don't know how to handle. All right, so you've heard the stunning news about the conference he's speaking at, alongside this radical calling for pedophilia of your young family members. You've heard the stunning news that he was responsible for killing over 4,000 dogs and cats and puppies and kittens. Surely there can't be more. And as the old movie Airplane says, yes, there can, and don't call me Shirley. I want you to take a moment and acquaint yourself with Abdul El-Sayed's sister. Now, Abdul's own record is of being a Marxist, Islamist, America hater. I got to say, as bad as he is, his sister is something really special. She's a professor at the University of Chicago, and unfortunately so many of our professors are radical. She's a full-on communist. She's a Marxist. She's a rabid Islamist. She is a naked Jew hater, and she hates America. And I'm going to back all this up. These are not empty charges. All right, October 7th. October 7th, when Hamas massacred over 1,200 innocents in Israel, when they raped little girls and women in the streets. That morning, Abdul's sister, Emin Abdelhadi, tweeted the following. This is the entirety of her tweet. Mourning freedom with a Palestinian flag.
Wow.
That was her tweet celebrating. That was at 5:51 a.m. on October 7th, 2023. That's while women and girls are still being raped, she's celebrating. And you might say, well, maybe she didn't know the facts. Well, then let's go till later in the day on October 7th. So Bernie Sanders, his own record attacking Israel and welcoming anti-Semitism is unfortunate. But here's what Bernie Sanders said on October 7th. I absolutely condemn the horrifying attack on Israel by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. There is no justification for this violence, and innocent people on both sides will suffer hugely because of it. It must end now. So that's what Bernie Sanders said the morning of October 7th. Here's what Abdul's sister said at 11:07 a.m. on October 7th, retweeting or quote tweeting Bernie Sanders. What a disappointment. If you can't stand with the people that have been held in an open prison for 16 years, finally fighting their oppressors, how can you claim to stand for justice? So understand, her complaint is Bernie Sanders was not pro-Hamas enough. She needed him to be even more pro-Hamas. That's how radical she is. That's how much she hates Israel. That's how much she hates Jews. And by the way, she's also a communist. So listen to her. This is her own voice talking about what she thinks about capitalism.
Capitalism is at the root of pretty much all of our social ills and has some way that it plays a lot into all the oppressions that we face. So for me, I don't see issues of sexuality or race or gender as separate from issues of economic justice. Capitalism has done a really good job of dividing us and has done a really good job of objectifying our bodies and just basically stealing from generation after generation of people who aren't at the top. So socialism really affects every type of political activity that I'm in. There's no separation for me between all of these things.
Senator, you listen to how well thought out her answer was. This is a core belief. I think it's pretty clear that you have core beliefs in this family, and this is the radicalization of a family. One of them has to dial it back a little bit, even though he didn't dial it back for years. Let's also be clear about that in El-Sayed. And so it's like, okay, I guess we can pull it back just a little bit while I'm trying to, become an elected official.
Yeah, look, and Al-Sayed has talked about how he hates Thanksgiving. It turns out his sister does too. Here's what she's tweeted on Thanksgiving and July 4th. Quote, "We can't have nice things under settler colonialism. May all the empires fall." And then on July 4th, quote, "Excuse me if I don't celebrate the transfer of stolen land from one colonizer to another. Hashtag July 4th. And then, amazingly enough, so she didn't think Bernie Sanders was woke enough or Israel hating enough or America hating enough. She also didn't think the University of Michigan was. So the University of Michigan on December 8th, 2023, tweeted out, "In the context of the national discourse, the University of Michigan unequivocally condemns calls for the genocide of Jews or any other peoples, as this is antithetical to our values." So, okay, fairly mild tweet saying that University of Michigan is against the genocide of Jews. What was Abdul's sister's reaction to this? Quote, "The students you have been arresting and disciplining have not been calling for a genocide of Jews. They have been calling for an end to the current, actual, ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. I am ashamed to be a Michigan Wolverine."
Wow.
That was in response to Michigan saying they opposed the genocide of Jews. That made her ashamed to be a Michigan Wolverine. And final thing I want you to hear about her. Surely she's proud to be a professor at the University of Chicago. I mean, after all, that's her employer. That's where she teaches. She teaches right now. She poisons the minds of young students right now at the University of Chicago. Obviously, she's proud of that. Well, turns out she's not. Give a listen to what she has to say about the University of Chicago, where she is a professor right now.
The University of Chicago, it's evil. It's a colonial landlord. Why would I put any of my political energy into this space? And I kind of had a little bit of disdain for people who spent a lot of time doing that. And the genocide really collapsed that and made me realize that two things. One is that, my students needed me. So it was like, I have to organize here to take care of my students, who I do care about. But I also realized, and I think this is a painful lesson that a lot of us in the Palestine Solidarity Movement have been learning, is that we don't have power. We can shift the moral authority all we want, and we've won the moral question. That was the imperative that we've had. Done, check. Put Palestine in the national consciousness, we did it. Make people sympathetic to Palestine, teach the history, we did it. Now you have white boys on the north side of Chicago being like, "Hey man, free Palestine." I'm like, okay, now did not see it coming, glad it's here. But what we don't have is power. And I think for me, the question of base building is about, I think the question that I'm asking myself, and I'm asking you to ask yourself, is where can I actually build power? Turns out, I work at one of the biggest employers in the city of Chicago. I work at a place that is a landlord, a healthcare provider, a police force, that shit, but they are, right? And a place where I have access to thousands of people that I could potentially organize. And you know what? It's not fun. Organizing academics? Next time you're in your organizing meeting being frustrated, please think of me. Please think about me trying to organize academics. It's brutal. I never saw this coming. However, but I'm just actually, this is where I need to build power, right? This is my best possible structural leverage. And so I do one-on-ones with my liberal colleagues who are like, "Well, I don't know, but I just think we should live the life of the mind here in Hyde Park." Where we go. It's I hear you totally. Yeah.
Unbelievable. This is, and by the way, this is when you and I have warned for a long time. You need to pay attention where you send your kids to school and who's indoctrinating them, because this is a woman who is indoctrinating children or young adults in college each and every day.
So what she says is, F the University of Chicago, it's evil, but where can I build power? I have access to thousands of people I can potentially organize. So the students, the young people, she is trying to proselytize them and turn them into Islamists and communists. And what she says explicitly is, this is where I need to build power. Well, let me just ask you something. Where do you think Abdul El-Sayed thinks he needs to build power? This is a family raised on hate, and this is a family devoted to hate. That's how radical the Democrats' nominees are this cycle.
Now, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you can go back and listen to the full podcast from earlier this week. Now on to story number 2. And by the way, if you thought it was just the Democratic Socialists of America that are really getting their mojo, I guess now the DNC is trying to say, no, we're just as radical as you are, with a new stance that the Democratic National Committee, just when you thought they might try to dial it down a little bit, the crazy, they have now changed their platform to say, hold on, we're all in on abolishing ICE, making sure they don't exist anymore.
Well, and there's some Democrat politicians who pretend, this is an extreme view. It's only by the radicals, the DSA, the communists and socialists in our party, although they won't admit they're communists and socialists in their party. It's not the rest of us normal Democrats. Well, this past week, the DNC was meeting in Austin, Texas, sadly in our home state, and the DNC adopted a resolution urging congressional Democrats to abolish ICE. And the abolition measure, it was known as Resolution 27, it cleared the DNC's resolution committee in a 25-12 vote with one abstention. It headed to the full membership. It was bundled into a larger package, and it was approved by the full membership. What do you think the vote was?
Well, I'm assuming, knowing the Democratic Party and radical as they are, it was probably a very high success rate.
Unanimous.
There you go.
Every single person voted yes. The vote's non-binding. It doesn't formally change the party's platform for 2028, but the DNC has now voted for a resolution saying abolish ICE. And understand what abolish ICE means. ICE is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. It is the agency that tracks down illegal immigrants inside the interior of the United States. It tracks down gangbangers. It tracks down MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. It tracks down murderers and child rapists and human traffickers. And the position now adopted unanimously by the DNC is the Democrats want to abolish it. If you abolish ICE, it means you are no longer willing to enforce our immigration laws. It means you want the illegal immigrants in America to stay here. By the way, with no ICE, nobody gets deported. Like once you get in, you stay here forever with no ICE. With no ICE, the criminal gangbangers who are illegals, they're not prosecuted, they're not arrested. By the way, the over 300,000 children that the Biden administration had in federal custody that they handed over to adults and then lost. And many of those adults were not family members. They don't know where they are. The Trump administration, one of the most important things they've done is they've gone and tracked down thousands upon thousands of those kids and gotten them out of situations where they're facing the potential for abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. The position of the Democrats is, to heck with those kids, leave them where they are. We're not going to enforce. We're not going to investigate. We're not going to do anything because, look, abolish ICE is the immigration version of abolish the police. And we've talked a lot on this pod about how radicalized the Democrats have gotten. This is no longer the fringe. This is the unanimously adopted resolution position of the entire Democrat National Committee. That means even the most supposedly moderate Democrat, their party's position is get rid of ICE altogether.
And Senator, final question on this. You look at the pushing here by the left to force, I think it's pretty darn clear, the Democratic Party to just become more and more extreme. Will there be pushback, or is this them just admitting, hey, stick with us, we're going to where you are in the Democratic Socialists? Or do you believe that voters are going to say, Democratic Party, you've gone too far?
Well, look, I hope so. That's what the midterms are going to determine, at least as an initial push. I hope the voters say, listen, I don't want unlimited illegal immigrants in our country. I don't want criminals released. I don't want ICE abolished. I don't want the police abolished. I want to lock up criminals and bad guys. Here's what the White House said. A White House spokeswoman, Lauren Biss, said the following this weekend, quote, extreme radical Democrats want to abolish ICE and defund the police. Instead of trying to abolish ICE, Democrats should be thanking ICE law enforcement officers for putting their lives on the line to arrest and remove murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and gang members from American communities. Many of these criminals were released from jails by Democrat radical politicians. President Trump's effort to remove criminal illegal aliens from American communities is already delivering results, including the lowest murder rate in 125 years. That's a profound record of success, but look, elections are about making the case to the American people, so I hope all of the Republicans on the ballot make the case that producing extraordinary results in immigration, seeing illegal border crossings drop 99%, producing 20% drops in the murder rates and 20% drops in the deaths from drug overdoses, that is saving the lives of literally thousands of Americans. That's a record of success. And the Democrats are saying, don't just go back to Joe Biden era. Listen, when Biden was president, we had ICE. We had not abolished the police, although Democrats in cities had slashed the funding of a number of police departments. The Democrat position now is go further than Biden. They don't just want open borders. They want to release violent criminals. And I got to say, I don't think that's where most Americans are. I think if you talk to your average American citizen, a Republican, yes, but also an independent or even most Democrats, and ask them, do you want to release murderers and rapists into your community? It is only the extreme zealots who would say yes. That used to be a position that was a bipartisan, like obvious duh position. Today, the Democrats are being driven by their zealots, and the rest of the party is terrified of those zealots. And so between now and Election Day, we need to make the case to the voters, and I hope every candidate does so. I can tell you on this podcast, we're certainly going to lay out the facts and make the case that we should be protecting American citizens and not releasing violent criminal illegal aliens into the United States. I think that's basic common sense. I think that's where most Americans are.
As before, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation on this topic, you can go back and download the podcast from earlier this week to hear the entire thing. I want to get back to the big story, number 3 of the week, you may have missed. All right, Senator, I want to get into this national security issue, the media not talking about it. But Hasan Piker's got a wingman brother. He is a space engineer with security clearance. Now, that on its face, not a big deal. What's a big deal is the details behind the brother.
Well, let's start with Hasan Piker. Hasan Piker is a radical. This entire show, we've been talking about the radicals who sadly are becoming more and more commonplace on the left, more and more commonplace in the Democrat Party. And Hasan Piker is a great example of he's an influencer who the Democrats have embraced. He is a communist. He is an Islamist. He hates America. He routinely rails. He hates African Americans. He hates white Americans. He hates the United States of America. He has said, and this is a quote, America deserved 9/11. This is, and by the way, Abdul El-Sayed and other Democrats campaign with him, embrace him. Look, when they stand next to him and both figuratively and literally embrace him, they're saying they support his ideas. Well, turns out Hasan Piker has a brother, and his brother is in a position that if he believes the same thing Hasan does, he's in a position to do real damage. Here's a story from the Washington Free Beacon. Hasan Piker's younger brother is an aerospace engineer with security clearances who spent years working on U.S. military projects for Boeing, projects that include Air Force One and the top secret, quote, doomsday plane designed for nuclear war. Now, let's see, is this guy, maybe the brother, he doesn't have anything to do with Hasan Piker, he doesn't agree with his views, maybe they're estranged. That might be a different circumstance. Well, turns out that is not the case. Let me continue reading. Murat Piker, an engineer who spent more than a decade at Boeing, regularly appears on his older brother's controversial social media channel and has also accompanied him to events. Hasan has declared that, quote, America deserved 9/11, bragged about his support for Hamas, spoken in favor of Iran's right to defend itself, and blamed Iran's death to America and great Satan rhetoric on the United States, quote, messing around in the Middle East. Well, his kid brother, Murat, worked as a full-time employee at Boeing for more than a decade and left on his own, of his own volition, earlier this year. He said, quote, my background includes significant experience at Boeing Space and Defense, where I led mechanical design and integration for next-generation satellite structures, managed high-pressure anomaly investigations, and defined structural interfaces across subsystems. That's what Murat says on his LinkedIn page. Murat and Hasan Piker were both born in New Jersey, but they did their primary and their secondary schooling in Turkey. Murat worked on Air Force One, and you have to ask. I don't know if Murat shares his brother's hatred for America, his brother's embrace of radical Islam, but given that they have done Hasan Piker's show repeatedly together, gone to events together, that is a reasonable inference and it's a reasonable question. And it raises the question, listen, if this is someone that hates America and wants to do damage to America, what harm could he do with security clearances working for Boeing and for the military on very, very sensitive projects?
Yeah, very sensitive projects. And you know, when you look at this, it's being exposed. I'm glad, by the way, for the work the Washington Free Beacon has done. Yet again, another example, Senator, of a major story that has national security implications, and the mainstream media just completely looks the other way.
Well, they do because they don't want to cover this. They don't want to cover the fact and understand that when Chuck Schumer, when Abdul El-Sayed have been asked, do they distance themselves from Hasan Piker, they consistently say no, that they want these radicals. Here, give a listen to Ro Khanna, who is the Democrat congressman being asked if Democrats should distance themselves from radical Hasan Piker.
You stuck your neck out for progressives like Abdul El-Sayed. You also supported Plattner before the allegations came out. You've also stuck your neck out for Hasan Piker. And you've seen that Hasan Piker is now being attacked 24/7 on Fox. Here's Haley Stevens going on Fox and saying, well, the first thing, how El-Sayed could moderate to voters is to get rid of the Piker affiliation. You've seen Neera Tanden retweet Laura Loomer's attack on Hasan Piker. Your comment on Hasan Piker, what should the Democrats do with him? Should they abandon him? Do you renounce your support of him? You tell me, Ro. Give it to me straight.
It's absurd. I mean, these are the same people who were at one point criticizing Democrats for going on Joe Rogan. I mean, remember when Bernie went on Joe Rogan? The people who said, "Oh, you can't go on Joe Rogan." These are the same folks who criticized me when I went on Ben Shapiro. Should I not go on Ben Shapiro's podcast? Because I disagree with him. We had a whole argument on the minimum wage. Just because someone is engaging with Hasan Piker, who has strong viewpoints on these issues, doesn't mean that you're endorsing every single one of Hasan Piker's positions. And if you're going to argue that we should exclude left-wing commentators, and frankly, some of these people were arguing that we should be canceling and excluding right-wing commentators, you're left with a party that is basically a status quo party. That's why we lost 2 elections.
But by the way, I love how he's sitting there. He's like, oh, it's no different than me going on Ben Shapiro's show. Ben Shapiro is not a radical in the way that you would have to defend Hasan Piker. And yet to compare the two, going, oh, I just take a risk on these guys because, I'm not going to agree with everything they say. Well, look at what you're endorsing. It is radical, extreme, and crazy.
Well, and look, Ro Khanna was someone who got elected to Congress from Silicon Valley. He was someone who got elected with the support of the tech bros. And his initial brand was kind of a moderate common sense Democrat. And then he looked around the Democrat Party and said, wait a second, nobody wants moderate common sense Democrats. And so he's decided to go hard left. As the beginning of that interview showed, he went up to Maine and embraced Graham Plattner and said, hey, this is great. You know, a Nazi communist, my kind of guy. And so, you listen to what Khanna said there. He said, well, just because they're engaging, that was the verb he used, engaging with Hasan Piker. Let's be clear. Al-Sayed is not engaging with Hasan Piker. He's not saying, Hasan, I actually think you're wrong when you say America deserved 9/11. I don't think we deserve to be attacked by Islamist terrorists who murdered nearly 3,000 people. They're not engaging. They're embracing. They're celebrating. They're adopting. It is who they are. And I will say, there's the old line that hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. Ro Khanna is rich as hell. And the latest news story said he traded $165 million in trades. He made over 5,000 trades last year. I don't think members of Congress should be buying and selling stock and getting rich. And this is a great example of the hypocrisy, which is that they embrace Marxism while living as complete and utter hypocrites.
As always, thank you for listening to Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Don't forget to download my podcast, and you can listen to my podcast every other day you're not listening to Verdict, or each day when you listen to Verdict afterwards. I'd love to have you as a listener to, again, the Ben Ferguson podcast, and we will see you back here on Monday morning.